Action. Welcome to the Captains and Coaches podcast. Already 2 episodes in and making updates to the studio. Follow us on YouTube or Spotify or iTunes. Got videos on all those platforms. Be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Tex McQuilkin, and today I am joined by longtime friend Cali Hinzman. Cali is a 9-year veteran police officer in the city of Seattle. And our relationship goes back farther than that. 15 years ago, we were training partners and coaches together in Washington, D.C. We also had the opportunity to travel the world coaching coaches, teaching people how to lift weights and run fast. Awesome experience with Cali. Most recently, together, we co-presented at the 2023 NSCA Tactical Conference in Las Vegas, where she presented the demands of a police officer and potential injury risks for first-year officers. Then I took those components, those risks for injuries, and presented training programs that they could adjust and certain things to look out for, and was a great experience working together again, showing these injuries, and naturally, we had to make fun with the title saying, "Give LEO injuries a rest." There we go. So excited to bring Cali on to talk, not talk movement, but talk the parallels between law enforcement and sport leadership, especially in that entry-level leader, that 0 to 1 leader who just steps into law enforcement, and what parallels coaches, team leaders, and even parents can make to help empower their future, their young athletes now, that are future leaders, potential law enforcement officers, and how they can prepare to take on the tasks, the responsibilities that have drastic responsibilities on not only yours, but other people's lives. This episode is brought to you by Captains and Coaches Old Bull Training Program. Leading by example is not optional. This is an effective, efficient, flexible training program designed to make you look the part, feel the part, so you can lead the part. For a 7-day free trial, click into the show notes and give it a shot. Now, without further ado, my pal, Cali Hinzman. Welcome to the Captains and Coaches podcast. I'm your host, Tex McQuilkin. I'm joined by my friend, longtime friend, Cali Hinzman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And congratulations on the podcast and the new biz. I'm very excited for you.
Yeah, we're going on an adventure. Leaders lead, as I say. So, which I wanted you to be one of the first guests on the show because you've been a leader to me and taught me so much. So I want to aim to tap into those lessons. And we've had the privilege to travel the world together, work together a long time, coaching coaches. And you step into an awesome role within the police department and forces, and that servant leadership that drew you there. That's where I want to begin our conversation. So you've been a coach, you step into an officer role. So what drew you to that? Why are you feel that vocation, that call to become a police officer?
Well, first, I'm still stuck on the fact that you think that I've taught you something, especially with regards to leadership. That's very flattering, especially coming from you, given that that is kind of your jam, kind of your passion. So I appreciate you saying that. That's really nice. Have no idea if that's actually true, but I appreciate it. But yeah, in terms of stepping into my job, I mean, I think it was just by accident that I was drawn to it. You know, when we worked for CrossFit Football and Power Athlete, this just seemed like when I did a ride along and got an experience for sort of real life application of so many things that we talked about. It just seemed like a natural extension of a lot of what we discussed, both openly in our podcast and private conversations that we would have, things that we were really interested in, and obviously like the training aspect rolled into it. It just seemed like a natural evolution to like challenging yourself. And I think from the moment I did a ride along, I was pretty much hooked. I know you touched on the term servant leadership. I'd love to say that I was called since an early age to help people in need and, you know, arrest bad guys and all that stuff. But I think that was just something that I fell into. And it seemed like to me, the way servant leadership kind of applied to that was just that I found something where I could really get to express all of my personal values in a very like real way. So rather than just, not that there's anything wrong with listening to podcasts, creating podcasts, or having discussions, or having certain passions and training and discipline, whatever it is. I was like, well, here's a real opportunity to kind of hold yourself to that really high standard. And little did I know the progression of police work would lead us to where it is today, where the standards are so incredibly high that it's almost, impossible to live up to societal standards for police work. But it still calls people to this day. New officers are still coming into the line of work. And it just goes to show you that there is this whole, I think, demographic of people who are intrigued by both servant leadership, that ability to exhibit leadership qualities through serving others, but also that are like really intrigued by living up to an impossible standard. I think there's a lot of people who do that. And, it can be to a fault, obviously, but it's one of those things where it's just, it has this allure to it. And so people want to see how closely they can actually live to that impossible standard. So that's kind of how I fell into it. And it's been an extremely rewarding experience for me. I've been with the Seattle Police Department for about 9 years now. And you've seen me through it all, right? Like from the beginning, like academy days to, different assignments within the department, different experiences working with different leaders within the department, and then to my current assignment. So yeah, I mean, it's in each of those capacities, I've had the ability to kind of learn from people and then, express that learning in a very real way on the street or with other officers.
Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, the team aspect, you have to immediately trust the people you're working with. And that goes to say so much in the leadership world in sports. That trust it's almost implied and taken for granted. But then in yours, it is not just a play where I need to trust the people next to me. It's now our lives, other people's lives, and different situations that you need to get into. In line with that trust and putting your life in somebody else's hands, speak to it on that implication and the weight of this, and that it really comes into play when it comes to leadership and then communicating to others like, hey, trust within my words. You have my back. I got your back. What is with the implication or the assumption there?
Man, I didn't know we were going to touch on this. This is such a good question because it's just so pertinent, right? It's this underlying foundation for everything we do. You can't go out and do an operation or a mission or really anything, respond to a call if you're on patrol, if there's not this foundational trust within your direct squad mates or your unit. There's, I guess the way that expresses itself is having that time to train together, knowing that your fellow officers are also taking care of themselves mentally and physically. It's not enough to just assume. We are put in a position in our department where training is something that I think we get to do a little bit more of than maybe your less metropolitan department. So is it a ton of training? No, I'd like more, but you actually get to see firsthand your fellow officers put in a vulnerable position where their training is put to the test, right? Their decision making, their ability to deal with stress at a high level. And then having that opportunity in training, it helps to build that foundational trust when you go out on the street and the stakes are much higher. And the scene is so dynamic. Things are changing constantly. I could give numerous examples of this, but it goes back to that kind of conversation we've had many times, which is falling to the level of your training. Not to bounce around a bit, but it's also you really trust that your coworkers are getting enough sleep, making sure that they're eating enough, making sure that they have a decent work-life balance, which is virtually impossible. You aim for whatever, you aim for the stars, land on the moon. It's like you may be able to achieve these things, but these are the ongoing conversations you want to have to ensure that you can depend upon the people next to you. It also goes back to just like, yeah, I mean, I think you tend to trust people more who take care of their bodies physically, and I know that's obviously pertinent to our philosophy with just training for the task. But you want to see your fellow teammates in the gym. You want to see your squad in the gym. It gives you a chance to also just under less stress, you get a chance to have those conversations about other things. That all builds into and weaves into the fabric of trusting one another, seeing where their mindset's at. And it plays itself out in the sense that if I'm putting together an operation, if I'm getting the sense that a coworker or a fellow officer is maybe going through something or has openly admitted to me that they're extremely tired or whatever it is, I might assign them a role that fits that capacity for their nervous system that day or whatever. Ideally, everybody's switched on at all times, but the reality of the situation is that's just not true. I mean, people have lives outside of work. We spend a tremendous amount of time at work. And so all of these things kind of play into having that open communication. I'm not expecting perfection from everyone at all times, but communication is key to building that trust so that we can put you in the best position to succeed, or hopefully they would put me in the best position to succeed. In my many deficiencies in police work, I would hope that when it comes game time or whatever, we're doing an operation, I'm not being put in a position that's so far beyond my capacity, you know, that I'm setting the rest of the team up for vulnerability, if that makes sense. So I think that, I think that's part of that team trust that we can keep each other and the public safe and the suspect safe. And then number two, trust that we're not going to set each other up for some critical vulnerabilities that, could also lead to significant liability. So,
Right.
like for instance, attitude. If somebody comes in and they have a terrible attitude that day, or they've just been working too much or whatever, it's like you have to be cognizant of that, and maybe that's not the person that you want trying to de-escalate a situation verbally with a suspect. So you just maybe like tactfully remove that person and just say, hey, why don't you take this role or whatever? Can you go run this name? Whatever it is, take them out of the situation where they could be escalating or setting everybody else up for some liability.
Yeah. Yeah. And self-awareness is key. And then how I would describe it for a leader leading a team would be then the social awareness. So I'm able to pick up on those keys, those cues, the team members, and then make adjustments. And then this is where a mentor comes in. If you see they need a mentor moment, then you step in. If they need a space, we'll just call it space, then we give them space.
Yeah.
And having that, then, I mean, there's certain times where in sport we get a hell of a lot more practice reps than LEO officers. So then, like, now there's a lot more, I guess, reps for that self-awareness and training the self-awareness and check-ins. So people taking the initiative outside of their jobs to then really focus on self-awareness and having the keys, the check-in on what they need.
Mm.
What are some self-awareness practices, get your mind right, if you will, that you've learned work specifically for you or some team members that you're working with?
Our team is sort of in a fortunate position where we, just a little kind of background on the unit, but we basically have kind of two missions that we operate in. One is the follow-up units, the detectives of, say, robbery or homicide or whatever the unit is. They'll give us a target that they're ready to have arrested. So they've developed a probable cause. They've basically determined that person's pattern of life, and they're like, here's everything we know about this person. Now we need you to effect the arrest. So that's part of my job. And then the other part of our job is more of like a proactive job where we go out, and while we don't have targeted individuals, we have targeted crime. So there's, maybe we're targeting narcotics one day, or maybe there's an area that there's a lot of violent crime like carjackings and that kind of thing. So those are kind of our two goals. And both of those roles in both of those situations, we typically split the unit up into plainclothes surveillance or undercover. And then the other unit or the other half of the unit is in like an arrest capacity or a rescue capacity. So they're uniformed. So I think with that being said, when you're kind of doing these check-ins with yourself, and maybe you are one of those people who have worked like 18 hours the day before or something crazy, right? And you're coming in and your nervous system might be fried. Maybe you're up till 3 or 4 in the morning. And to me, those check-ins they're not perfect, but I'm very like self-aware in the fact that, okay, maybe this is a day where I will volunteer to maybe be the plainclothes surveillance or something like that, where I feel like there's a less of a chance of me coming out of my role for like a life safety issue or something. And my job is sort of, it's less dynamic. It's more sort of observational. And is it ideal? No, you don't want to go to work on little sleep in general, right? A lot of people are still depending on you. However, the chances of you getting in, say, like a physical altercation or you needing to draw your weapon in a plainclothes capacity are far less, right? And so for me, that's like one of the check-ins where it's like, it's not my favorite role. I prefer to be in uniform. However, I think that the way our unit works, it's a great opportunity to kind of let people's nervous system and adrenaline come down and re-regulate from a very stressful week. So we cycle in between that role. And not only is it highly beneficial to keeping everyone safe, when you have surveillance on pretty dangerous people, you can gather so much more information and intelligence for your officers, right? You can set them up for the best possible success. But it also gives you a chance to step away. You endure stress, but you endure like a different kind of stress. And so I think that that's kind of a nice embedded way where if you're doing that self-awareness check, you can roger up to do that role instead. And it's like a little less stressful on your nervous system. But other ways check in. I mean, I don't even, I don't have to do like cognizant check-ins because I feel like my body just tells me. I think I'm at an age now where I just physically, I can tell if I'm, smash that, and I will easily forfeit a workout for sleep these days. And then the other thing is just like my attitude. I think it's important for you to be in like a feedback loop that's completely open, right? Like at home with my husband and my kids, it's like, I know that if I am short with them or if I'm, not as patient, then this really helps recalibrate me to
Oh, word.
into a position where I can kind of say, okay, like, even if it means taking the day off, like, honestly, like taking a day off, because sometimes the hours are so long where I feel like it's completely warranted to take time off if you need to, so that you can come back in and be twice as effective, right? And so that the feedback loop also within your unit, right? It goes back to that communication aspect where you have to, I personally, like, I just openly tell people, just tell me. I have no ego in terms of like, of course I have an ego, but I have no ego in terms of like somebody criticizing me, like for, poor tactics or, a poor attitude or, an unwillingness to work with a team or whatever. Like, just, I'm trying not to cuss, but just tell me, just tell me if I'm deficient in one of those things. Have that conversation. I'd much, much rather know than continue to just muddle through and potentially be setting up a pattern of poor performance and fatigue that is ongoing. And before you know it, it sneaks up on you. You make a bad decision and it's just catastrophic.
Hmm. Yeah, and being open to that feedback is incredibly important, because if one day, yeah, the wall is up, and then you give somebody a hard time for you know, telling you your shoes are untied or something,
Mhm.
or yeah, your fly's open, then okay, they won't give you feedback when
Oh, yeah.
it really matters. And then it
And that's
starts.
why, yeah, I think that's also why, and coming from the environment where we all used to work together, is like, I feel like the joking and the ribbing, there's obviously a point of diminishing returns, but it's so healthy because if you can rib someone about casual things that are non-consequential, right? Inconsequential. They really don't matter, but it shows an openness and a willingness to joke about your own faults and to accept that we are not perfect and that it's not the end of the world if your fly's open, if you even if you misspeak and use the wrong word or you fumble your words during a briefing or something. And if you can, there's a time to joke, there's a time to be serious, but if you can take that feedback in the moment, and I think it's very healthy. There are some people who are completely incapable of that. And those people suck. Those people are no fun to work around. They're no fun to do stressful things around. And so I think that is what also builds tremendous cohesiveness within a unit. That's why there is so much joking in police work. There is, I mean, you need that downtime, but you're also sort of, it's also part of that, like, again, that fabric of like building trust and building a dialogue. Like how far can I push the joking before I might tell you something that I legitimately have a complaint about, like, did we really need to do XYZ? Did you really need to, drive 110 miles an hour for this particular incident, whatever it is. Like, so those conversations need to be had.
Mm-hmm. So you feel the ribbing sets you up for the moment to have that hard conversation?
I
Where
do.
they
I do, because I just think that if you have that comfortable rapport with someone, then you're capable of, I think if you have that rapport with someone, you're capable of taking it beyond that, right? I don't know. Sorry, Tom's just bringing the baby in here for me. That's
Oh,
okay.
no worries. Yeah, I'll buy some time. So then from a sport team perspective, if we're on the topic of ribbon, of talking a little trash with your team, this is what I would categorize as leading an individual. So even if it may be in front of a group, it's light, so it doesn't turn into negative, but at the same time, like, we're focused individual, and then nobody on the team gets away with anything. So
Right.
we got to make sure everybody has their moment, or else then it turns into a targeted attack, whether a coach intended to do that or not. And then the purpose of the ribbing, there's deep meaning, and one of the deep meanings is now we're preparing you and teaching you as an adult how to act for when their opponent across the field or the stands or whoever now starts to talk like trash in a meaningful, threatening, demeaning way.
Dude, it's
You
so
know
true.
how to just like water off your back. So it's I feel like coaching freshmen, you got to go right in and start give them a hard time, but ensure they know it's a joking way. So then, if you do feel that sense, that guard, that wall go up, now I need to have a mentorship moment, even one on one, to ensure, hey, like this is a good time. We're giving you the purpose here. Here's the deep meaning of what we're looking for.
Yeah,
So then,
it's so true, Tex. I mean, there's really no different between what you described and what I deal with all the time. It's like the constant criticism, I'm talking about when you're dealing with the public, whether it's a suspect or whatever that you're dealing with, or, our unit works a lot in protests as well. And the amount of, you call it trash talking, the amount of trash talking, we'll say, the amount of hateful things from who you are as a person to your appearance, to your belief system, just by looking at you. I mean, the amount of crap that is talked to us to basically goad us into,
guilt,
some sort of
yeah,
behavior to take you out of your performance mindset. It's incredible what people will do. And it's done on a mass scale in protests. It's done on an individual scale with certain suspects who will literally say anything. I've had people that I've dealt with tell my sergeant, make claims about me to my sergeant that were completely false claims. I've had suspects say really offensive things like sexual things, and it's just like, I think that there is something to be said about not letting that trigger you into a tailspin And even when people are, you know, trying to, if it's making a comment about your appearance or something like that, you know, if you're used to being ribbed from time to time, you can generally just laugh it off. You know, you can almost just, I mean, a human can really only take so much. But at the same time, I think it really does set you up for success when you've been, you know, sort of jokingly or, you know, mentally in a way preparing for this, like day in and day out, just dealing with some ribbing. I think there's a lot of value to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My last podcast, we talked a lot about perfectionism and then how that tail spins into a performance detriment. So then the more you fight to have it perfect, and then when somebody steps in and says whatever they're going to say, there's so many moments we see in professional sports. That's when the tailspin starts.
It's crippling, right? Like
Yeah.
perfectionism is crippling in that way. And the same thing is true in police work. You know, if you had an operation that you planned to a T, and something deviates from that perfection, you have to be adaptable and you have to be able to be dynamic in that situation. And it's also true for like another way you can look at that is, you know, friend Lexi, who passed away a few years ago, you know, we used to talk about like how the goal is not necessarily like winning per se, right? The goal is to get the most favorable outcome possible. So it's almost like if your goal is perfection, or even if your goal is like in police work, winning, right? If you're viewing it as I need to win this situation, I need to somehow overpower, over dominate, whatever it is, it's just not going to be possible sometimes. And, you know, a winning mindset's a great thing to have. However, you can have a winning mindset, but also accept a favorable outcome, right? Like something where the situation is not perfect. Maybe you made some concessions as an officer. However, everyone's safe. No one got injured. You know, you're not going to get beefed by your department. You know, like, it's just that has to be the goal. So I think that is also one of the things that is difficult for some people and athletes to transition to, or athletes, or I mean, I'm making a generalization there, but you know, people who have that background to maybe come into police work, for instance, and it's like they have a game plan, they want to quote unquote win and get that same feeling of winning, right? But you have to remind them that there's a difference between that feeling of winning a game, winning a match, whatever it is, dominating your opponent, versus getting the most favorable outcome for everyone, right? And again, I want to be very clear. You don't take away your winning mindset. Your winning mindset is the same. However, winning may look differently than you expect it to look, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think athletes stepping into that perspective, that'd be a great thing to start to teach when it comes to the sport and the field, especially when
Right.
the parents coming in from judging from the outside, the only thing they see, win or lose, in playing time.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't see the 100 hours of practice and dynamics and opportunity, and then trusting a coach to put the right player in the right situation. So it's important then, if training the athlete, if a parent is coming in on the car ride home saying something along the lines of, you know, coach this or that, or, you know, Sally's getting a lot more playing time. Okay, well then we don't want the kid to turn around and start to have resentment for Sally or coach.
Mm-hmm.
So redefining, still have that winning attitude, as you said, but then favorable outcome. We still won.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't get the playing time. Or last year we got our ass kicked by them, and now, even though we lost, it was competitive. And then
Right.
I made strides from the last game. So reframing different outcomes per se, rather than just the black and white W's and L's.
Yeah. W's and L's, points, accumulation of points. There's different ways to win. There's different definitions for winning. What was everyone's experience? Did it bring the team up as a whole? Obviously, you want to win the game. And I think it says a lot about leadership too when, you know, somebody who's in a leadership position can embrace that mindset as well. They can, in the moment, they're making decisions and maybe taking on feedback in the moment that may not be what they envisioned for success or for a win per se, but they're able to take feedback in the moment from people who have who are getting new information or who have ideas in the moment. And with something, again, as dynamic as police work, winning can look like so many different things. You can plan something to the nth degree, but you have to be so flexible with new information that's coming in or new things that you're seeing. And as a leader, you have to be able to take a step back and say, I trust my people and what they're seeing and what they're doing. And we're going to win this, so to speak. We're going to get the most favorable outcome possible, but it might not look like my specific vision for how I wanted this takedown to go or how I wanted this operation to go. And it's like, who cares? Who cares? It's not about you. It's about the most favorable outcome. So I think that's just kind of a part of that servant leadership
Mm-hmm.
position.
Let's stick with the feedback loop to then decide favorable outcomes, and then say it wasn't favorable. What tools are in place by yourself or your team to help then grow experience and prepare for the next opportunity?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, at least with our team, and I think it's probably, I think I'm proud to say that I think I work with a department where a lot of people are very self reflective, even if there's not a formal debrief or something like that. I think most of the people that I've interacted with over my 9 years they've been that type of person who wants to have, I mean, there's always the outliers, but I think the vast majority of people, they want to hear feedback. They go back into the patrol car, whatever it is, and they say, all right, how did this go down? How could we have done this better? So I think first and foremost, it kind of just starts internally, right? Like just as soon as the adrenaline comes down, you're starting to kind of relive how everything played out. And if there's not something glaringly obviously wrong, then you kind of go back and work the steps and how could I have done this better? So it starts with just that mindset, that personal mindset of like reflection. And then I think, at least our unit has in place a debrief, right? So if once the operation is done or whatever it is, we get together and sort of like, I would call it a formal capacity, but oftentimes it can be informal, depending on, if if there are some things that went pretty poorly, then obviously it's much more of a somber experience. But if everything went well, it can be lighthearted. Oh, this was funny, or this guy answered the door completely naked, or it's like it's just it can be just a funny chance to kind of come down from the experience. But yeah, debrief is extremely valuable. We first talk through basically, okay, what happened? So from the very first part of the mission or whatever, we basically talk through our roles. And so, okay, who was the first to respond? Where were you set up? What did you see? What decisions did you make? What would you, and then it evolves into, after everyone's gone through what they did do, then we go back around. It's like, what would you have done differently? Or, any self critiques, we'll say, like any self critiques, or we'll say, you know, what things would we maintain? What things would we improve on? Like what are the things that we did right? What are the things that we can improve on? And so, that to me is one of the best settings. The other thing is we are living in a time and age where we have just cameras everywhere. We have cameras on our bodies, cameras on our cars. There's several Instagram accounts that will scan the radios. Depending on what we're doing, if it's just out in the public, they might respond to where we're at, or maybe you're just a citizen who's around at the time who's videoing you. So there's no shortage of video feedback these days too. So if in your mind you think you did something that was so badass, and then you watch a video and you look like, you look amateurish, or you look sort of frazzled, or whatever it is, I mean, it's extremely humbling. And so you can have this verbal debrief, but then oftentimes, if it's like vehicle tactics and maybe we're pitting a vehicle, which is basically, getting it to turn around and stop a pursuit or something, or we're pinning a vehicle somewhere, so to immobilize it in a parking lot or something, you can think your vehicle tactics were like spot on, or you can think that we're crappy. But our reflection is not fully accurate when we're so jacked up and the stress is really high. So I think the video stuff is that game footage, it's immensely helpful to do some real reflection, some accurate reflection on not only tactics, but like stress level as well. How was I mentally making my decisions? What did my voice sound like? Was I taking a leadership position, or was I being a good follower? Was I taking orders well in the moment? Did we work as a team when we were extracting this person from a vehicle? Or did it seem like nobody knew exactly what role they had? Or, you know what I mean? So it just, again, no shortage of, again, if you're in a unit like I am, and then obviously even more elite units like SWAT and all that. I mean, there's the one thing that they love to do is just talk about what they did, you know, and so it just never ends. And so the self-analyzing and the team critiques, there's no shortage of that, which is, it's great. You don't want it to cripple you at a certain point, right? You can start to get into the minutia, but at the same time, bless you. But we have no shortage of ways to debrief and really like reflect.
Yeah, the one thing I'm starting to see, especially with working with high school, college level athletes, and then professionals here and there, the how a person delivers feedback to another is how they're giving feedback about themselves. So aiming to pick up on that. And if they are nasty to a teammate, well, now I'm just learning through experience that that's exactly how they're speaking to themselves about themselves in their own mind. So now it's helping craft and teach them through the direction of, now, okay, I'm going to have them hold the mirror up, and then if they don't see the mistakes they were making, okay, this is where we can start, and then help them start to see that what they could have done, the decisions, the tactics, pretty tactics are pretty black and white, and then behavior, now we can go into like a decision tree in sports anyway. I imagine it's a lot more complex in the streets. But then now, okay, bringing in some empathy and some social awareness to that. Okay, well, that's what you said. How do you feel that your teammate is going to take that? Or how do you feel they took that? And then what are the consequences down the line? And then practice is the ultimate training environment, which we can control. So again, aiming to put kids under stress, see how they're delivering feedback to one another, and then, okay, well, we can expect this to be ramped up during our game competition. So it's, yeah, training and spending time with one another is so valuable, so we can start to trust each other, but also see how we can deliver or take feedback from one another.
Yeah. And I think before you even like give the feedback too, you have to kind of ask yourself, what's the goal? Before I say this, what's my goal, right? And then if the goal is to make someone aware of maybe an opportunity for improvement, right? And to set them up for success, well, I would hope that when you paint that picture for them, that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're not discouraging them or making them, embarrassment, yeah, shame, all that stuff. It can work. However, I don't think that necessarily instills habits to want to train. I think that can be pretty detrimental. For all it's going to do is, for some people, it can force them to want to shy away from training because it sets them up for yet another opportunity to have their flaws exposed, right? And so you want to make sure, I think, you want to make sure that you couch your feedback in a way that is setting them up to want to improve. And, I think like a good way is just like, walk me through what led you to this decision, right? Like, walk me through your mindset to make this decision. So you first get to see it's not about you and what you think about their decision, but first talk me through why you decided to, drive this speed to get to XYZ, or why you decided to, you know, draw your weapon in this situation, or
Mhm.
whatever it is, right? Like, walk me through that. Um, or if it could be anything, room clearing, or, serving a warrant or something. Like, walk me through why you decided to take this angle and not that angle. So you can at least show them that you value kind of, that they were still thinking about a process, but you want to give them the opportunity to talk it through themselves, because they might be able to in that moment realize, oh shit, like I have now self-discovered that I screwed that up. I made this decision based on some bad information or lack of experience or whatever it is. And as they're talking through it, they can say, oh, you know what? I probably shouldn't have done that because we only had two people with us or whatever. And then, I think that just instills the habit of self-reflection versus, so for me, that's kind of like the first way to go about it. And if the person is just like, yeah, I did what I did, and it was the right thing to do, XYZ, I'll be like, well, you kind of, luckily I don't work with a ton of people like that, but you have that opportunity to say, well, did you think about doing it this way? And it can get contentious, though. I mean, there's a lot of egos involved. This is not like a perfect scenario, right? And so it comes back to that trust thing, where no one rule is that no matter what is said during the debrief, first of all, rank doesn't matter in debriefs. So if you're a sergeant, or even if a lieutenant is sitting on it, or you were the team leader, or you were the case manager, or whatever, rank does not matter. In the debrief, we are all subject to criticism and to praise and whatever. No one should feel inhibited because there's a level of leadership there that they're not comfortable speaking openly. And so the other thing is, once things are said in the debrief, it's case closed, right? Like, you start a new chapter when that's over, and nobody goes, whether it's to lunch afterwards or home or whatever, and continues to just spool up about something that happened that was less than favorable or whatever. So we try to adhere to that as much as possible, because it helps foster, I think, a healthy team environment and a healthy channel of communication. There's a time and a place for it, and then there's a time and a place also to just mentally, emotionally move on. So I mean, that's kind of our mechanism for feedback.
Yeah, those are two big rules I'm going to hold on to, and then establish them as expectations, because a lot of the meetings in a sport environment, they're coming quick. We got a timeout, we got a halftime, or we got a moment between practice, because if we're talking too much, we're not necessarily getting our skills sharpened. So, and the big one I like there is, I like them both, but from the perspective of rank doesn't matter. Freshman, senior, we're all here to push the program forward. So if a freshman's got something to say, let them find their voice. Don't
Mm-hmm.
shame them down. And then once it's said, case closed. So this is training them to next play, next pitch, next opportunity, versus dwelling in the past, and then a lot of the resentment that becomes a cancer throughout the season. So over a long season, that starts to build up if you don't express it, or you just hold on to it. So this puts us in a position to move on. And I like the feedback, and then leading your team to an answer and helping them talk through it. I imagine they'll have to, and y'all are on the same level, if they ever have to speak up about their decisions. Now you've helped prepare them to have that conversation and walk through that when they got to go lead up.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When you take them back and you say, okay, well, what kind of led to this decision? Walk me through your mindset. And you do hear that, I don't know. First of all, yay for that person to say that, to admit that, right? Then giving you some BS answer, well, some sort of excuse, right?
Yeah.
But if they just said,
Blaming somebody else. Yeah.
yeah. If they just said, I don't really know. I did what I did and it was an impulse, or I did what I did and I don't really know why I chose that decision, or whatever it is. First of all, that's a reflection of a healthy, I think, team environment where they feel comfortable saying that. Not to get too mushy, but it's huge. To me, it's like, applaud that, like, cool. But now let's cycle back, let's work back, because we want to have, that not to get on all the buzzwords, but you want to have that intentionality for, and if they're, if you're sort of like making decisions, whether it's on a team or in police work, and you're kind of doing them willy nilly, well, especially in police work, that's big time problems if you don't have a reasoning for behind why you made every decision that you made. And so, yeah, then at least you need to have that awareness, cycle back. Okay, we need to revisit some foundational stuff, some foundational principles, to whether it's uses of force in police work, or foundational principles for why you decided to use a certain tool or a certain tactic. And that needs to be on the forefront of your mind. So I think though it's very rare, but also very commendable when someone says something like, I don't know, and I did it out of instinct, or I did it out of just natural reaction. It's not what you want to hear, but it's also definitely better than creating some false scenario or blaming someone else or whatever.
Mm-hmm. We had a conversation last week. I want to bring up these two terms that I feel are specific, or maybe they're not specific to police work, but I feel can start to bridge some gap in the sporting arena. But operational and then tactical leadership. So how do you differentiate those two terms and then prepare your team in both sides of that coin?
Well, I know we were talking last week, those terms came up. It could mean different things in different departments, but certainly in like when we're having, if we have a target or we have some sort of mission or an operation that we're working on, the operational leadership is kind of like I would say it's more of like a general oversight of how, how we're going to reach success, how we're going to achieve the goal, right? Again, like, to me, it's not about winning, it's about getting the most favorable outcome. And then the tactical is like nitty gritty, like how I trust that person with, everything I have, that they have the knowledge and the tools to be able to affect that outcome with tactics, right? So for us, it would be positioning of certain officers, or the timing of certain certain pieces. How am I allocating my assets, right? How am I going to make this operation a success if I only have 12 people, right? Or something like that, right? So working within the skill level, the policy, and the assets, the tools that you have available to you, the number of vehicles, whatever it is. So that's going to be kind of the tactical lead, or the tactical you know part of that. But the operational is, is more of like a general, are we as a team, are we maintaining the integrity of like who we are, what we do, what Seattle Police Department stands for? Are we keeping that and at the forefront of this mission, right? So it's much more of like an oversight type thing. And they're also thinking about other things, right? So the that operational lead position, they might be thinking about things that the tactical person is not. The tactical person is working on, the again, the nuts and bolts of it. And an operational person might be thinking, okay, if we arrest this person in this environment, how is that going to affect the rest of the case, right? What if another potential target sees this person, and how is that going to affect subsequent arrests on, say, people who are buddies that might be, doing a lot of robberies together? If we do it in this apartment complex in a way that's so, visible to this other target, this is just an example, but they might be thinking of more big picture type things. You're thinking down the line too. How can we keep in mind the priorities of the Seattle Police Department, or the priorities of this unit, to then continue to do the work that they do, if that makes sense?
The key that I wanted to bring in is that there's different levels of thinking to this. So in the beginning phases of stepping into a leadership role, especially as an athlete, you only think there's one way to do things, but there's different modes to then take on. And the expectation, especially as you go up in responsibilities, now there's even more forms and styles and approaches and ways to think of leadership.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of, that's the beauty and the allure of like why I love my job so much is because that growth never ends, right? As soon as you think you have, and this is certainly not me, but as soon as you think you have, for instance, the tactical portion dialed in, and you've seen so many scenarios that you feel comfortable planning the tactics for varying missions, right? There's then the next echelon of goals and of, there's a next sort of understanding of what success looks like, right? Maybe it's more of a long term, case manager type position, or it's you're thinking of, maybe it's just comes right down to statistics, like trying to lower the statistics of certain crime in certain geographical areas, right? So it's like, that's the beauty of it is it just never ends. And I feel incredibly fortunate that I'm surrounded by so many very, very intelligent people who are so good at filling those different roles.
All right. So our last few questions here, we're going to be vulnerables, and I want to go back to your first time leading. So think about that mindset, that approach, and then mistakes or things you overlooked or assumptions that were made that then led to, oh no, there's this knowledge, this experience gap that I got to think right and then make strides to become a better leader. Like moments of accelerated development through reflection upon mistakes or assumptions that you made.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're all the time. I'm trying to think back to an early leadership position or a specific incident. Uh, did you want a specific thing? I don't know.
What there's new leaders stepping up with your team, exchanging and going over. So then
Yeah.
think about now you step into a mentorship role, and then if they make a call, and then maybe you have a story that then says, uh, let's rethink that, or think about a parable or an experience that you would tell to help lead them to more awareness.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's no shortage of learning curves. I would just say that probably the biggest thing that I learned was just that in terms of like leadership is, again, it doesn't come down to winning. Like I think when I first came into the mindset, like when I came into police work, I had that mindset about winning, and I was like, looking back, I was so egotistical. I was like so wrapped up in trying to overpower the situation. And first of all, it's just downright not possible for me in a physical way in a lot of situations. I can remember numerous times where it's just like, this person is stronger than I am, and it feels like they're winning. It feels like that type of thing. So it's realizing that not only you're not going to, you can't physically and sometimes you can't verbally dominate everyone. And maybe that's a little taboo for me to say now because police culture has changed so much. But just looking back, and I think realizing that you don't have to talk sense into people, you don't have to try to get them to listen to you. That's not what any of it's about. And this is, again, this is very specific to police work, but you don't have to win those conversations. And this, again, it might sound bad, but you don't have to change lives. You don't have to do any of that. But you have to take every call or every mission one by one and have the most favorable outcome possible. And so for me, that was a huge learning curve. I think I took criticism from the public very hard and realized that you're not going to be perfect. So to focus on perfection is the wrong focus. The focus is on being safe and trying to safely, whether it's effect an arrest or whatever the case is, and let the chips fall where they may. I can just think back, there's a lot of times where it was like, you know, getting into screaming matches with people, right? Like not healthy stuff. And, realizing that none of that matters, right? Ultimately, when I show up somewhere, like I'm in charge of that situation. If it's come to me, then that means that I am now sort of like I'm leading the direction of how things go. But sometimes that means you let other people think that they have a lot more say than they do, if that makes sense. And again, that might be specific to police work. I don't know necessarily how that translates to teamwork. And it might also just be like I had developed compensations for not being the biggest person, not having a physical presence on certain situations. But you can make someone in a way feel like they're making some choices for themselves when really you hold all the cards in police work. Like you are, and that's the mindset you have to have is like, I know how this is going to play out. We're going to have a favorable outcome for all parties, but you have to make the person, you have to make them feel human, like they have some choices. And now that I have kids, I can definitely see how a lot of those things relate. And again, a lot of times with your kids, it's like it's not about feeling like I'm straight up dominating them on a daily basis. Sometimes it's just about getting the most favorable outcome for everybody involved. So I think that's just kind of, I know I harped on that a lot, but that is one of the most valuable lessons that I have learned. And it translates to how you interact with your coworkers and your team as well, right? Like you don't have to, your tactic doesn't have to win. When you're sitting out and you're putting everything on the table, all the options for how to do something, everyone's bringing forward their experience and they have a reason why they want to do their tactic, right? And sometimes you can, in a team environment, you can make concessions and say, well, it's maybe not the tactic that I would use, but is it going to get us the most favorable outcome? Yeah, it actually need to step back and look at it from that perspective. So it translates quite a bit to just, again, fostering that healthy communication. I hope that's helpful.
Very, and there's a lot of different takeaways, and one I'm thinking of is like the assumed power with being a team captain. You get named, you get pinned with a C on your chest. You worked hard for it, and now you're fighting for everyone to listen to you. And then it's just that human nature, especially with high school boys, just because now you're in an authority position, now I'm not going to listen to you, even though we're
Mm-hmm.
teammates. And then one day ago, we were best buds. So now it's okay, sticking with what got you to that position, trust, respect, and then not aiming to overpower or wrestle or, come up and say, hey, they won't listen to me. Okay, well,
Yeah.
then let's walk through that and help you now aim to gain their respect now that something's going on. I don't know what it is. Could be an infinite number of things. So then, yeah, that growth and maturity, I feel a lot of captains then they step into because they assume everyone's going to listen now that they're in a position of authority. More
But
often than
that's,
not, it's not the case.
and that's the beauty of, though, like informal leadership. Like maybe in sport, it's necessary to have sort of like a designated captain for the season or whatever. But to me, that's the beauty of, like, in the unit that I work in, we all alternate that role. And so if you're going to MF a captain one day and just like basically shit on all their ideas and criticize it, your time is coming too. So it helps kind of just, it puts everyone in the driver's seat from time to time. And I just think that that's an important balance, not only of just respecting other people's body of experience that they have to bring to the table, but it also just, again, it comes back to that trust, right? Open communication and feedback loop and all that stuff. I personally think it's great that we have opportunities to each lead on a weekly basis or a monthly basis where somebody new is in the driver's seat and we have something to learn from that person. And it also just gives those natural leaders or whatever, whoever is the natural leader, it gives them some downtime too to kind of have a healthy perspective on kind of sit back, right? The people who are always sort of taking the lead, it gives them, they need to sit back from time to time and get to absorb things as well, which I think is healthy.
Very much. So, yeah, two notes on that. So, depending on the team and the season and just the dynamics of the nature, sometimes there's assigned captains like 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's, hey, this game, you two are going up. This game, you two are going up. So then it all depends on the team, and each
Mm-hmm.
team dynamics is cool. And then the how I aim to, if there are still designated captains, apply responsibility from youngest all the way up, and so everybody's getting an opportunity to lead, is through the warm up. So then either handing over the scheme to run or leading the warm up, but then saying, "Hey, Ivy, we're doing 10 4 count squats. You're up." So then Ivy goes through the 10 count. So now handing off, and I used to keep track like every single kid. So then everybody's getting multiple opportunities throughout practice, throughout a season. So now everybody's getting into the hot seat. So if some freshman's making fun of some kid who's got the squeaky voice or whatever, then they're on the hot seat, and I'm standing right next to them, and I'm giving them that hard time. So aiming to develop that awareness and empathy and um, effective leadership throughout. And then the last part, like I feel, and this is the challenge with a lot of individuals within the high school realm, they sports all they got, so they become just codependent with the leadership role or the starting position. And so when you do sub them out, or you do uh, hand off a responsibility, then they go through an identity crisis. Now it's with that connection to authority. Now, when you got to step in and follow, you're not prepared to do so. And that's what I want to aim to identify, and then help them overcome that, because you're not going to be an athlete forever. Your competitive window closes. That dependence and that identity is this, it will end. So we can aim to get ahead of that. So I hear some of that within the points you brought in there, that you got an awesome team that you're working with.
Yeah, that feels like a whole, that whole identity thing too feels like a whole other podcast that we could go down. That's definitely true, and um, yeah, and also just you don't want to be reliant on any one person, because what happens if that person is taken out of the picture, right? Or they're sick one day, the day that you're supposed to do X, Y, Z. You know, it's like you just don't want to, you don't want to put, there's something to be said about having position specific skills. That's great, but being over reliant on the confidence of one person is not healthy. I'm sorry, she's got a dirty diaper.
Oh, it's okay. We're wrapping up, and yeah, this is the importance of teaching your whole team to lead. If you're relying on one person as the thermostat, and they're just having a bad day, Sigo breaks up with them, school, life, etc. Yeah, it'll catch up to you and be costly for the team. Well, let's close it out. Callie, thank you for joining me.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
I
Sorry
know,
about all the crying.
hey, no worries. This is the phase of life. I love her hair. Freaking, she's on fire over there.